On an unusually peaceful day in the city of Aldea, everything looked calm on the surface. Then a red-haired girl suddenly appeared and declared that she had finally found the protagonist. Grabbing his arm without hesitation, she insisted that they needed to leave at once. Not long after, the same girl kept pressing him to hurry. Kai, already worn out by her energy, could only let out a long, tired sigh. A little later, inside a lively tavern, the same kind of scene unfolded yet again. This time, a girl in a blue cloak approached him and said that she had finally found him as well. With a smooth and inviting tone, she told him that he should come with her to her estate. Kai, clearly fed up with this repeated pattern, took another deep breath. He quickly refused, explaining that he was busy today, which left the blonde girl visibly baffled. Clinging tightly to his arm, she complained and asked why he could not come today when she happened to be free. On the verge of tears, she pleaded with him to come play with her. Completely lost, the young protagonist wondered how his life had ended up like this. To understand that, it was necessary to go back a little further, to the middle of a dark forest, where two bandits had first dragged him into this mess. Slightly tense, Kai immediately went along with what the men said. As they prepared to go to sleep, the bandits ordered him to stay on watch because the ransom on the captives was extremely valuable. As a final command, the leader told him that if the prisoners started making noise, he was to beat them into silence. But in his mind, Kai already knew that the captives did not even have the strength left to scream. Alone in the darkness, he reflected on how absurd his situation had become. Holding his head in frustration, he desperately tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Then the memory came back to him. He remembered trying to save someone before being struck by a truck. Yet for some impossible reason, he had later opened his eyes in this strange world. As he stared up at the night sky, the truth slowly settled in. He knew this world far too well. Faced with the evidence, Kai realized that he had somehow ended up inside the fantasy game he had been playing the other day. Standing near the bandits' camp, he understood with dread that he had reincarnated right in the middle of the villain's side. A cold shiver ran through him as he cursed his terrible luck. Just then, a noise from the cart nearby caught his attention. When he moved closer, he found an iron cage and froze in shock. Inside, the supposed hostages were actually 3 girls trapped in the darkness. From his memory of the game's story, Kai knew that every villain involved in this incident was destined to be wiped out. Being here among them could only mean disaster. Without wasting a second, he decided that the smartest option was to escape immediately. Searching his pockets, he found a map and some money that could help him on the road. After checking the routes, he concluded that getting out should be possible without much trouble. Still, before leaving, he glanced back one more time. Then, moving carefully and quietly, he unlocked the iron cage. In a low voice, he told the captives that they should escape with him. Inside the cage, the 3 frightened girls stared at him, while one of them looked especially sick and fragile. Full of suspicion, the red-haired girl asked if he was seriously talking about escape. With a sharp glare, she accused him of trying to trick them with some cruel joke. The white-haired girl followed in the same tone and demanded to know why they should trust him after all that had happened. Kai fell silent for a moment, searching desperately for a convincing answer. Seizing on that hesitation, the redhead pointed out that he clearly had nothing to say and declared that his little act had already failed. Thinking quickly, Kai spun a lie and claimed that he had infiltrated the enemy group, then apologized for arriving late to rescue them. Even as he told such an outrageous and shameless lie, he understood that earning their trust in that moment mattered more than anything else. Pressing them urgently, he warned that if they were caught now, he would be finished. Unfortunately, the red-haired girl revealed that her leg was badly injured and that she was in no state to run. The platinum blonde confessed that she was completely blind. To make matters even worse, the youngest blonde girl, Remy, was unconscious and sick on the floor. With no hope in her voice, the redhead said that even if they escaped, they would only die somewhere along the way. She added that simply learning he was not actually their enemy was enough for her to feel grateful. Hearing that, Kai's heart grew heavy. At that moment, the little blonde girl let out a weak groan and lifted a trembling hand. In a feeble voice, she begged for help and pleaded to be saved. The instant Kai heard that, his whole expression changed. Clenching his fist, he firmly declared that he would not abandon any of them. He promised that he would carry those who could not walk and insisted that fleeing still gave them a better chance than waiting there to die. Startled by his determination, the girls questioned what exactly he thought he was doing. With the map in hand, Kai assured them that he knew the surrounding area and that everything would be fine. Once he had made up his mind, he told the other 2 to hold on tightly, then hoisted all 3 of them up and began running through the dark forest. As he ran, he quickly realized that this body was far stronger and sturdier than the one he had in his previous life. He shook that thought aside and focused only on escaping. Relieved that no one seemed to be chasing them yet, he continued pushing forward. While moving, he mentally traced the route with the map he had taken earlier. On it, he saw the city of Aldea, exactly as he himself had once named it in the game. That small confirmation gave him even more confidence. Without slowing down, he led the group along the correct path until they eventually reached a hidden treehouse. At that point, he quietly celebrated the fact that they had successfully gotten away. Curious, the blind girl asked where exactly they had ended up. With a faint smile, Kai revealed that it was a secret hideout he himself had designed in the game. Standing before a magically sealed door, he tried to remember the password. Asking the girls to wait for a moment, he stepped forward toward the entrance. Placing his hand on the magic seal, he entered the keyword he had once used in the game. At once, the door lit up with a blue glow and opened, allowing them all to enter safely. Once inside, he admitted that he had not actually expected this place to exist for real. He immediately laid the little blonde girl down on a bed so she could rest. The redhead, clearly surprised, commented that he was definitely no ordinary spy or agent. She pointed out that having a treehouse like this hidden in such a place made no sense otherwise. Inwardly, Kai agreed, but he brushed it off and claimed that it was nothing special. Worried, the red-haired girl quickly asked whether Remy would be alright, and the air in the room turned heavy. Then Kai suddenly remembered that he might have left useful items stored here. At that point, the injured girl asked whether there was anything to eat. As Kai opened a wooden chest, he muttered to himself while searching for something usable. Luckily, the system worked exactly like it had in the game, and several potions were still preserved inside. Holding up the bottles, he announced that he had found medicine, but the redhead immediately scolded him and said that an ordinary potion would never save someone in such a weakened state. Calmly, Kai handed her a glowing purple vial instead. Without any concern, he explained that it was not a normal medicine and that it should be effective. The redhead's eyes widened the instant she saw its color. At the same time, Kai realized that the item was apparently quite rare and remembered that he had never filled his inventory with useless junk. In the game, this potion had cured nearly everything, whether injury or poison, and it had been incredibly difficult to make. With the vial in their hands, the two girls were left utterly stunned. Kai vaguely remembered that he still had more than 100 of them stocked away, which meant he could probably become rich just by selling a few. Unable to believe it, the red-haired girl questioned who he truly was to possess something so valuable. Kai merely let out a sigh with the hint of a smirk. In a flat tone, he advised them not to ask any more questions for all their sakes. Right after that, he instructed the other two girls to drink the potion as well. Turning away, he jokingly remarked that he had no desire to keep carrying 3 people around. Even then, the platinum blonde still found it hard to believe that the legendary universal elixir was really in front of her. Kai handed her another vial and confirmed that he had one for her too. After taking a sip, the blind girl was astonished by the effect and could barely believe what had happened. Standing beside the bed, Kai praised the little blonde girl's toughness and carefully gave her the potion as well. Little by little, the glowing liquid passed down the unconscious girl's throat. In the next instant, her body shone with a bright light, making it clear that the cure had worked. Impressed by how practical and immediate the magic's effect was, Kai breathed out in relief. When Remy slowly opened her eyes, she thanked him in a weak and trembling voice. Gently, he told her that she should keep resting because the potion could heal the body, but not exhaustion of the mind. As the room gradually dimmed and the magical glow faded away, Kai picked up the empty bottles and looked toward the others. To his surprise, both the red-haired girl and the platinum blonde were already standing again, completely healed. Glancing at the prophetess, Kai was already imagining the kind of reward he might demand once he safely returned them home. But that thought was interrupted when the two girls burst into tears of joy over being able to walk and see again. Awkwardly, he commented that he had no idea how long they had been suffering like that. Out of simple respect, he gave them space to take in the miracle. The following day, once things had calmed down, their conversation continued, and Kai learned that they had originally been kidnapped in the city of Aldea. He immediately pointed out that they were now more than 2 cities away from there. Scratching his head, he admitted that getting them back would take quite a while. Irritated, the redhead told him that he should take that problem up with his fellow bandits, since the entire mess was their fault to begin with. Frustrated, Kai asked whether any of them knew how to use teleportation magic. The redhead replied that if any of them could do that, they would have escaped long ago. Embarrassed, Kai gave a weak laugh and admitted that her logic was flawless. Secretly checking his own status, he lamented that he had ended up in the body of a low-rank hunter with nothing remarkable about him instead of in the overpowered character he had once controlled. While studying the map, the platinum blonde explained that throughout all of history, only one person had ever been capable of using teleportation magic. Hiding his disappointment, Kai agreed and quickly moved the conversation elsewhere. Looking at the group, he asked how everyone was feeling that day. With a gentle smile, the platinum blonde thanked him and said that she was still adjusting to the miracle of seeing again. A little embarrassed, the red-haired girl admitted that her leg had completely recovered and offered him a sincere word of thanks. Then, in the next breath, the haughty girl demanded that he stop speaking to her so casually and introduced herself as the noble Karen. Following that example, the platinum blonde introduced herself as Nina. Soon after, they all confirmed once again that the sleeping blonde girl's name was Remy. With sweat running down his face, Kai panicked inwardly over just how difficult it was to keep all these fantasy names straight in his head. Refocusing himself, he declared that the greatest problem now was finding a way to return all 3 of them safely to their city. Karen, sounding more confident now, asked whether he intended to protect them from the villains. But Kai immediately crushed that expectation by saying that he could not promise anything. Shocked by such a cold response, Karen flared up and demanded to know why he would say something like that. Wearing a completely serious expression, Kai answered that no one could ever guarantee victory in a real fight. Deep down, he understood better than anyone that this was no longer just a game, and because of that, he wanted to avoid deadly battles at all costs, even if he already knew much of the world. To make his point clearer, he reminded them that they had no way of knowing how many enemies were out there or how strong those enemies might be. If they wanted everyone to survive, then the most important strategy was to avoid trouble whenever possible. In the end, each of them only had one life, and once that was gone, there would be no restarting anything. With firm resolve, he promised that he would do everything in his power to lead them to safety without being forced into a fight. Karen, as blunt as ever, asks whether he actually has some brilliant strategy in mind. Letting out a strained laugh, Kai admits that it is hard to think clearly when she stares at him with so much pressure. Under her sharp and judgmental gaze, cold sweat begins to form as he struggles to steady himself. After forcing himself to calm down, he says that the kidnappers are probably keeping watch over the city of Waffer. Pointing at the map with his finger, he explains that the bandits will naturally assume he fled to the nearest city. Because of that, he says their safest option is to head south through the forest, reach a camp, and pay for a secure carriage there. Karen, still worried, points out that they have no money and cannot possibly afford the trip. Patting his bag, Kai assures them that he took the bandits' money before leaving, and adds that they even have enough to buy fresh clothes if needed. Moved by everything he has done, Nina gently asks why he is helping them so much. She directly points out that he used legendary elixirs and revealed things that no true secret agent would casually expose. Faced with such painfully reasonable logic, Kai starts stammering and cannot find a proper way to answer. With no path left open, he shamelessly doubles down and claims that he is an intelligence agent. To make the lie more believable, he says that he is only carrying out orders from above. At that exact moment, the little blonde girl begins to stir on the bed. Noticing the movement, he asks whether she has finally woken up. In a sleepy voice, little Remy says that she has, though she adds that the timing feels rather late. Wanting to steer the conversation elsewhere, Kai stretches and suggests that they all wash up in the river around dusk. Nina quickly says that she knows purification magic and can clean everyone without trouble. Always practical, Kai tells them to use that spell on Remy while he goes to bathe by himself in the river. Karen immediately finds it suspicious and remarks that it is strange for a secret agent not to know such a basic spell. Trying to protect his cover, he argues that relying on magic too often only draws unnecessary attention. Soon after, the girls clean themselves inside the room with purification magic. Meanwhile, he enjoys a warm bath in the river and finally gets a chance to relax. Once everyone is clean, they gather around the fire and share a meal together. Ready to resume the journey, Kai puts on a dark suit of armor that covers him from head to toe. Taking the lead, he calls for the girls and says that it is finally time to depart. A week later, the guards stationed at Aldea City receive an urgent alert. The atmosphere around the main gate is tense and restless, with guards moving in a hurry. Then, to everyone's immense relief, the group arrives safely at the city entrance. The moment the guards recognize the three noble girls, one of them exhales in relief and says that it is a miracle to see them alive. Karen immediately says that all the credit belongs to the armored knight who brought them back. Overflowing with gratitude, the soldier bows deeply and thanks him for carrying out such a heroic rescue. He then asks the young ladies to wait inside until their proper escort arrives. Curious, Nina turns toward Kai and asks what he plans to do next. Speaking coolly through his armor, he says that he intends to remain in the city for a while. Karen, never one to soften her words, asks whether he has any specific plans. Before he can answer, the guard suggests that a warrior like him must have to report his success to his superiors. Without missing a beat, Kai agrees and continues the lie in order to avoid further questions. The soldier presses a little more and invites the armored hero to receive a proper reward, but he refuses, saying that he has no time. Hidden behind the helmet, the exhausted boy is already at his limit and wants nothing more than a bed to collapse into. Before leaving, he warns the girls to obey instructions and not lower their guard until they are safely home. With a smile, Karen accepts the advice and thanks him again for all he has done. In a small but gentle gesture, Kai pats Remy on the head and says his farewell. The little blonde blushes softly and responds only with a timid nod. After entrusting the girls to the guards, he turns around and walks away without hesitation. Desperate to thank him properly, the soldier tries to stop him, but the knight shuts that down immediately. Without even looking back, he says that he is simply going to enter the city and vanish. The guard captain respectfully welcomes the mysterious warrior into Aldea. As the black-armored figure disappears into the crowd, the soldiers remain frozen in place. Staring after him, the captain mutters in disbelief that the man is beyond extraordinary. Cold sweat runs down his face as he declares that the armored knight is a complete monster. To explain himself, he says that he used his appraisal skill and detected a high-ranking item on the stranger. Worse still, he reveals that only 2 elite clans have ever cleared the dungeon where such an item can be obtained. From the reports and the circumstances, the captain recalls that this same man crushed the Red Freed Mafia on his own, rescued 3 hostages without suffering so much as a scratch, and moved with incredible caution the entire time. With all that evidence in front of him, the captain becomes convinced that he has encountered a legendary veteran. One of the younger guards, unable to hold back, complains that the captain never even checked the man's identification. Angered, the captain cuts him off and asks whether he truly wants to treat a hero like a criminal. In a firm tone, he warns the rookie that they cannot afford to offend someone who saved the 3 most important young women in the entire region. At that point, another soldier suddenly remembers that the knight handed out universal elixirs as casually as if they were cups of water. The captain's eyes fly open the moment he hears those words. As living proof, the guard explains that the noble girl's illnesses and fractures vanished instantly after drinking them. Deeply impressed, the captain remarks that the knight gave away such priceless items without the slightest hesitation. The guards, all on edge, admit that the stranger's actions are outright insane. Realizing how serious the matter is, the captain orders an immediate report to high command and to the guild. His subordinates rush off at once to spread the news. After all, Karen is the daughter of the most prestigious ducal house among the nobility. Nina is part of the direct bloodline of the church's sacred foundation, while little Remy is the heir to the most powerful merchant family on the continent. As the captain pieces all of this together, he concludes that the masked knight interfered in the affairs of the greatest powers in the land without showing even a hint of fear. To the captain, the man carried divine-grade items, refused any reward as if it meant nothing, and behaved like someone entirely above ordinary concerns. In his mind, only one explanation makes sense: the mysterious knight must belong to one of the Empire's secret forces. Completely removed from the uproar he caused, Kai walks through the city with wonder in his eyes. Paying close attention, he realizes that the streets look exactly like they did in the original game. Even from a distance, he spots the grand building of the Hunters Guild. Although he wants to run around and explore every corner, his body is worn down to the point of collapse. Making things more uncomfortable, everyone on the street keeps staring at him. When a small boy stares at him especially hard, he starts wondering what the issue is. He had naively assumed that the city would be full of people walking around in heavy armor, but he soon realizes that his own rare gear is glowing faintly and attracting far too much attention. Too exhausted to deal with it, he decides that reaching an inn is his top priority. Then, out of nowhere, a little girl grabs onto his leg and excitedly shouts that he looks amazing. Completely caught off guard, the armored boy freezes in the middle of the street. Elsewhere, inside a grand mansion, a cry of relief echoes through the hallways. With tears streaming down his face, Karen's father clutches his daughter and sobs in relief. Already losing patience, Karen tells him to calm down, breathe properly, and stop embarrassing himself. In the middle of the emotional chaos, her father suddenly notices that she is standing perfectly fine and immediately apologizes for causing a scene. Smiling proudly, Karen says that her leg was healed by a universal elixir, then spins lightly to show that she's completely recovered. Her eyes gleam as she explains that the mysterious knight produced the legendary potion as casually as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Growing more animated, she says that the warrior handed it over without hesitation and even refused any reward in return. Intrigued, the nobleman reads over the written report to confirm the details. As she studies it with him, Karen notices a new point and asks whether Kai truly acted on his own. Calmly, her father explains that he never sent anyone, and adds that if he himself had possessed a universal elixir, he would have used it on her long ago. Karen falls into thought and concludes that the so-called agent must have lied to calm them during the escape. The head of the family studies the matter carefully and decides that the knight likely belongs to intelligence because he knew about the Red Freed Mafia. In his view, the man clearly had inside knowledge of the syndicate, though his actual mission had only been to rescue the girls, meaning he may have broken his organization's rules in the process. Wanting to help, Karen's father decides to send an official letter of thanks so that the savior can be protected. Karen immediately grows uneasy and says that doing so would draw far too much attention, which could only worsen whatever punishment the agent might receive. She then asks whether her father has any idea which secret organization the man belongs to. In a serious tone, he reveals that he received word 2 days earlier that Red Freed had already been captured. Looking at the route on the map, he realizes that the knight deliberately circled around Walfer in order to avoid the bandits' attention. Karen quickly points out that such a move proves how sharp and tactical the knight really is. The Duke says that everything about the man matches his suspicions perfectly. Fixing his gaze on his daughter, he reveals that the force responsible for capturing the Mafia is the Verdar Direct Control Squadron. Stunned, Karen repeats the name of the Empire's most feared organization. In practice, the Verdar Squadron acts directly under Imperial command and preserves public order by any means necessary. There are even rumors that its members are the greatest hunters alive. In other words, they are the elite among elites, the absolute pinnacle of military power. Because of that, the Duke concludes that the savior must be a high-ranking individual trusted with independent missions. For the knight's sake, he tells Karen to keep everything secret and not expose his identity. As a show of gratitude, the Duke vows that he will repay the debt no matter what it costs. Since the warrior vanished somewhere inside the city, he orders Karen to summon the maid, Lifia, and begin a search immediately. Karen agrees without delay and rushes from the room. Left alone in his office, the Duke sinks into his armchair and begins to reflect. In the depths of his heart, he prays that the knight truly is an important pillar of Verdar, because only that would shield him from severe consequences. Knowing how the world of power works, the Duke also realizes that the other two families must already be trying to locate the masked man as well. The next day, at the inn, the atmosphere is calm and almost sleepy. As he eats a good steak, the innkeeper thanks the young man for not causing any trouble in the establishment. Making conversation, the owner remarks that the man in black armor is incredibly polite. Relaxing as he eats, Kai listens to the praise with a blank face, unaware of how absurd the situation has become. Taking advantage of the peaceful mood, the innkeeper asks whether he came from somewhere far away, and Kai gives a small nod. Suddenly, the tavern door is thrown open by a soldier, pulling everyone's attention toward the entrance. In an urgent tone, the guard asks whether anyone has seen a knight dressed in black armor nearby. At that very moment, Kai and the innkeeper exchange a startled glance. Panic rises inside him, and he silently begs the owner to protect him. The old man smoothly lies to the soldier's face and says that he has seen no such person, while adding that the Duke is clearly overreacting. The guard, unconvinced, presses him and asks again. Breaking into a cold sweat, the innkeeper still keeps his composure, and Kai inwardly thanks every god he can think of for the man's acting talent. Letting out a frustrated sigh, the soldier finally accepts the answer and thanks him before leaving. Once the door closes, silence settles over the inn again. But just as Kai begins to think the danger has passed, another person steps inside. This time it is a nun from the Holy Church, asking about a man in black armor. The innkeeper quickly pushes Kai behind the counter and comes up with another excuse. Wearing a polite smile, he tells the nun that he has not seen anyone matching that description. Satisfied, she thanks him for his time and leaves. The door has barely shut before yet another messenger bursts in, this time from the Merchant Council. Nearly driven to tears, Kai crouches on the floor behind the counter and curls into himself to avoid being seen. Once again, the innkeeper uses the same weak excuse to protect him. The guard eventually gives up, says his farewells, and complains about his failure. Finally alone again, the innkeeper calls out to Kai, who is still trembling beneath the counter. Terrified, he slowly crawls out and struggles to understand what kind of disaster just happened. Holding his head in disbelief, the old man asks what sort of crime Kai committed to have the three greatest powers in the city searching for him at the same time. Completely confused, Kai swears that he has no idea what he did wrong and starts to wonder whether he made some terrible mistake without realizing it. Nearly desperate, the owner tells him to resolve the matter quickly before the tavern gets dragged down and shut. Caught in a mess he never expected, Kai can only think about how he is supposed to disappear now. Far away, Karen's older sister carefully examines the redhead's leg to confirm that she is truly fine. Karen calmly says that it no longer hurts at all and that she has been completely healed. Sitting on the bed, Karen thanks her sister for the care she has always given her and admits that she will miss the routine they once had. Smiling softly, her sister says that she is happy to see such improvement, though she also feels a strange emptiness now that their old habits are ending. Before long, Karen's thoughts drift back to the masked knight. She says that she cannot understand how someone so conspicuous still has not been found anywhere in the city. In her eyes, Kai is obviously trying to throw the searchers off his trail. Pulling up a chair, her sister agrees and says that their father believes the same thing. In a quieter tone, Karen admits that she is afraid the knight will be punished for giving away a legendary elixir. With one hand on her hip, she recalls that he even tried to pretend the potion came from his own personal supply. From the way she sees it, the masked warrior did everything he could to conceal his connection to whatever organization he serves. Letting out a deep sigh, Karen says that she can only hope he does not receive some terrible penalty. Her sister, slightly amused, points out that it is rare to see Karen looking so worried and adorable at the same time. Shrugging awkwardly, Karen argues that the knight saved them all by himself, so of course he deserves that level of concern. Her face turning red, she crosses her arms and complains about being teased. In Karen's view, the knight truly risked himself to rescue them, even though doing so may have placed him in danger with his own organization. To make matters even clearer, she adds that Nina's and Remy's families feel the same way. Even so, Karen insists that she is the one thinking about the savior more than anyone else. Her sister immediately bursts into laughter and teases that this must be love. Meanwhile, back at the inn, the owner tries to reassure Kai by saying that he has done nothing wrong. Even with that comfort, rumors continue spreading through the streets, and the search for the Black Knight only grows more intense. Pointing out the situation plainly, the old man says that no one except Kai himself could possibly be the masked man. Feeling completely cornered, Kai begins wondering what kind of punishment awaits him if the rumors are accurate. The innkeeper says that, in the worst case, the three great families might simply ban him from the city forever. Looking at him with pity, the old man admits that hiding him is weighing heavily on his conscience, but still advises him not to switch ends at this point. To make matters worse, the reward for providing information on Kai has already risen to 3 million at the city council. Startled by that number, Kai blurts out and asks why the old man has not turned him in already. Laughing at his expression, the innkeeper explains that the three families are handling things quietly behind the scenes because they do not want to draw public attention. In the end, the old man suggests that Kai put his armor back on, slip outside, and at least enjoy the festival while he still can. Drained mentally, Kai agrees and leaves the counter with his head hanging low. Wishing him luck, the owner tells him to enjoy the city while he still has the chance. Slightly encouraged by that idea, Kai decides that he may as well enjoy one last day before getting thrown out the next morning. As he walks through the streets, he watches the sun begin to set and tries to find at least one small bright side in his absurd situation. Then his eyes catch sight of the city's great clock tower. Back in the game, he had always loved climbing that tower at that same hour of day. Even though he knows the entrance price is outrageously high, he heads straight for the ticket booth anyway. Determined to relive the memory, he climbs floor after floor while admiring the view around him. And the moment he reaches the top, the air fills with surprise. The top of the clock tower should have been empty, yet someone was already there, quietly admiring the scenery. An elegant woman dressed in black stood beneath the open sky, her face hidden behind a mysterious mask. The moment she sensed his arrival, the red-haired woman slowly turned toward him. For an instant, Kai froze, captivated by how strikingly beautiful she was. Stammering awkwardly, he managed to offer only a simple greeting. With calm politeness, the woman responded and welcomed him to the top of the tower. At that moment, he remembered a rumor from the game, one about a hidden encounter with a woman at the clock tower. Remaining cautious, he kept some distance, wondering whether this was that very event. In a gentle tone, the masked woman praised the view and said that it was the perfect place to clear one's mind. Agreeing with her, Kai admitted that the scenery truly was breathtaking. Curious, the woman then asked what had brought him to a place like this. Looking a little downcast, he confessed that he had come because he needed to sort through some troubles weighing on his mind. Then the woman shifted the subject and asked whether he knew the man in black armor. The question made him swallow hard, and fear immediately rose in his chest as he wondered whether his identity had been exposed. Forcing a nervous smile, he played it off and remarked that the Black Knight had become the talk of the entire city. The woman honestly admitted that she too was searching for that hero and said that she would very much like to meet him in person. Uneasy, Kai asked whether the Black Knight had done something wrong. Laughing softly, she assured him that the man was not wanted for anything sinister. Soon after, she explained that the authorities merely wished to express their gratitude, though the details had been kept confidential. Hearing that, Kai relaxed a little. Simply learning that he was not being pursued for punishment lifted a great burden from his shoulders. At that moment, a luxurious carriage arrived at the base of the tower. Catching sight of it, the mysterious woman realized that her ride had come. Curious, Kai asked whether she had to leave already. With graceful charm, the woman said that they would surely make progress in the search soon, then offered her farewell. As she descended the stairs, she left an air of mystery lingering behind her. Alone again on the observation deck, Kai watched her departure. For a moment he stood there thinking, unable to guess who the masked woman really was. Outside the tower, the woman stepped into the carriage and found Karen waiting inside. Eager and impatient, the little redhead insisted that they ought to wear masks while searching the city so they could find Kai without attracting too much attention. Karen's sister immediately teased her and complained that she had only been dragged along as an extra for one of Karen's reckless schemes. Laughing lightly, the masked woman apologized for the younger girl's bold behavior. In the end, she admitted that she was simply glad her sister had come to fetch her from the tower. During the carriage ride, the masked woman mentioned that she had met a young man at the clock tower. Knowing the rumors surrounding the place, Karen immediately suspected that the stranger had been investigating the city's search efforts. With a calm smile, the woman assured her that although she had been suspicious at first, their conversation had been peaceful and carried no hidden motives. To the masked woman, it had been a rare and strangely pleasant moment of quiet. She explained that she had cautiously asked him about the Black Knight just to test him, but the young man seemed to know nothing. Disappointed, Karen muttered that her father had already begun to suspect Kai had left the city. Then, without warning, the masked woman recalled one striking detail about the young man from the tower, and Karen immediately went still. Sharply curious, the redhead demanded to know exactly what the man looked like. The woman described him as a handsome young man with a calm presence and a scar on the left side of his face. Karen instantly shouted that the Black Knight bore that exact same scar. Without thinking twice, she threw open the carriage window in desperation. Raising her voice at the driver, she ordered him to turn around and go back to the tower immediately. Startled by her reaction, her sister asked whether she was truly serious about such a wild conclusion. But Karen, shocked by the connection, realized there was a strong chance that the stranger from the tower had been Kai in disguise. Upset that no one had told her sooner, she explained that the scar was something known only to her and her father. Her sister, finally understanding the weight of that detail, fell into stunned silence. The carriage made a sharp turn on the deserted road and sped back at once. The moment it stopped, the two sisters rushed out and sprinted toward the clock tower as fast as they could. Filled with hope, they prayed that they would reach the top before Kai vanished. By the time they arrived, both were out of breath. But to Karen's despair, the terrace was already empty. Kai had already left. Elsewhere in the city stood the headquarters of the Treasure Hunters Guild. Inside, the guildmaster was losing his mind because he still had no information about the Black Knight. While reading over the latest reports, he concluded that the masked man was most likely a member of the imperial force known as Vertar. By his reckoning, Kai had single-handedly saved the daughters of the three most powerful families in the region while also crushing the Red Freed Syndicate. Looking at the entire affair, the guild leader pointed out that kidnapping such high-ranking noble daughters was practically the same as attacking the empire itself. Given a crisis like that, he reasoned that it made perfect sense for Vertar to step in personally and handle the matter. To make his anxiety worse, he complained that no one in the city had even managed to establish contact with the knight. Driven into desperation, the guildmaster even ordered his subordinates to bump into the man by accident if necessary, just so someone could start a conversation. In a bitter twist of fate, even that plan had failed, because when a little girl ran into him, Kai merely helped her up and kept walking. The spies had been left speechless, able to do nothing but thank him and watch him disappear into the crowd. Defeated, the guildmaster sighed and wished only that the knight would return to the capital as soon as possible before causing even more complications. Then, without warning, the office door was flung open by the receptionist. In obvious panic, she announced that the masked man had just entered the guild. Assuming it had to be a joke, the master told her to stop fooling around. But when he saw the open doorway and her expression, he realized it was real. In the main hall, the imposing black armor had already drawn the attention of every hunter present. The guildmaster rushed out at once to greet the distinguished visitor. Behind him, the receptionist nearly burst out laughing at how quickly his attitude had changed. The hunters themselves struggled not to laugh as they commented on how absurdly polite their usually rough superior had suddenly become. Sweating heavily, the guild leader asked what had brought such an important individual to the guild. Trying to hide his own nervousness, Kai replied that he had only come to take a look around. The master instantly welcomed him with exaggerated courtesy and thanked him for honoring the guild with his presence. Inside his own mind, however, the master had already begun inventing countless conspiracy theories about that harmless remark. Hearing the words, "take a look around," he interpreted them as reconnaissance disguised as a casual visit. Within seconds, he concluded that there was no point in trying to outplay someone so far above him. In short, the guild leader convinced himself that he was dealing with a terrifying strategic monster. As someone who had once dreamed of joining Vertar but never possessed the strength to qualify, he could only stare at the living embodiment of that ideal and feel the gap between them. Keeping up his respectful demeanor, he invited the masked warrior to his office if he wished to inspect the place further. Kai accepted immediately, assuming that such treatment was normal guild procedure. As they climbed the stairs, the entire hall erupted into gossip. At the tables below, the hunters wasted no time exchanging theories. To many of them, the whole situation seemed like pure theater and exaggerated rumor, yet some noticed that the man's composure was far too calm for someone ordinary. More than that, the warrior moved with his guard down, as though he would simply wait for any attacker to make the first move. From that, they concluded that such a relaxed man must be strong enough to destroy anyone there without effort. A chill passed through the room. Some of the hunters even shrank back, convinced that in a close fight, the entire guild would stand no chance against him. Deep down, more than one of them wondered whether the masked knight might even be strong enough to challenge an S-rank beast. Meanwhile, the protagonist inwardly suffered as he imagined the guild members spreading even more ridiculous legends about him. With every step, he felt as though the lie surrounding him was growing larger and more impossible to control. After the short visit, the guildmaster personally escorted the knight back to the entrance. Still sweating from the tension, Kai decided then and there that he never wanted to step inside that guild again. Venting inwardly, he reflected that he had expected the guild to question him, yet the atmosphere had been deeply bizarre. Remembering the murderous fear and reverence in everyone's eyes, he shivered. What troubled him even more was that the guildmaster had been so polite instead of rude, unlike the version from the original game. Without understanding why, he kept wondering how he had somehow received VIP treatment from the hunters. Still, despite the discomfort, the trip had at least helped him explore the city and ease his boredom. Determined to keep walking, he stepped back onto the street. But he quickly realized that peaceful sightseeing was impossible when he stood out so much in such flashy armor. Then he heard the sound of a carriage stopping directly behind him. Karen leapt out at once, pointed straight at him, and triumphantly declared that she had finally found him. Kai froze on the spot as he recognized the crest on the carriage and realized it belonged to Karen's noble house. Without hiding her irritation, Karen demanded to know where he had been hiding all this time. Pointing vaguely to the side, he admitted that he had spent the whole time at the inn downtown. Shocked, she complained that the tavern owner had lied directly to her face when he claimed not to have seen the Black Knight. Wearing a mischievous smile, Kai admitted that he had asked the innkeeper for that small favor. Karen immediately deflated, left speechless by the humiliating fact that she had been fooled by an old tavern keeper. Trying to brush the matter off, the masked man suggested that perhaps he was just good at hiding. Annoyed by the joke, Karen grumbled that she had no desire to hear any more of his weak excuses. Just then, a sweet feminine voice from inside the carriage drew her attention. The moment he heard it, Kai recognized the person immediately from her voice and hair. The woman from the clock tower stepped gracefully out of the carriage and, now without her mask, formally introduced herself as Lithia. With calm sincerity, she apologized for the delay and thanked him once again for rescuing them. In a gentle tone, she asked whether the knight might have some free time now. Already anticipating trouble, Kai wondered aloud what exactly would happen if he accepted such an invitation. Karen quickly answered that he was simply being asked to come to the mansion and receive a formal expression of gratitude. Without hesitation, Kai curtly replied that he was busy and refused on the spot. Despite everything he had done, he genuinely feared that one mistake in front of high-ranking nobles might be enough to get him executed. Sensing his nervousness, both sisters let out soft chuckles. Karen had no intention of accepting his refusal. She seized his hand by force and, blushing slightly, insisted that at least this once he should allow the family to thank him properly. Then she wrapped herself around his armored arm and began dragging him toward the carriage. Utterly defeated, Kai climbed into the vehicle and resigned himself to whatever fate awaited him. During the ride, Karen smiled in satisfaction, pleased that she had finally managed to capture the runaway hero. From Kai's point of view, however, it felt less like an invitation and more like being arrested and taken into custody. Lifia expressed her gratitude as well, and stated that his rescue had saved not only their lives but the honor of the duchy itself. Resigned, Kai silently admitted that the chaos finally made a little more sense. Then Karen pointed at him again and declared that there was still one very important doubt she needed to clear up. Hidden behind his helmet, Kai inwardly complained about Karen's stiff and intimidating tone. Before long, the redhead lost patience, dropped the formal act, and returned to her usual loud and fiery self. Giving a quick nod, the Black Knight told her to stop dragging it out and simply say what she wanted. Karen went straight to the point and asked whether he had thrown away a fortune in legendary potions during the rescue for no reason. Burdened with guilt, she confessed that she had started to believe he vanished from the city because he had gotten into trouble with his organization. In a reassuring voice, the warrior told her that the items belonged to him and that there was no problem at all. Hearing that, Lifia's eyes widened as she silently confirmed to herself that the potions had truly been real. Karen, still worried, asked whether keeping such an immense treasure for himself was not dangerous. Pressing him anxiously, she demanded that he explain more clearly how he had obtained such things. Inside the helmet, Kai panicked, completely unsure how to invent an excuse that would free him from the conversation. Cornered, he realized he had no choice but to convince the two sisters that everything was under control. As a final measure, he said that he had no regrets and that the only thing that mattered was the fact that her leg had healed. Then, with a calm and unexpectedly charming tone, he told Karen that she should simply enjoy her life and allow him to deal with his own problems. The little redhead instantly turned bright red, and silence took over the carriage. Lifia was also deeply impressed, and she thanked him once again for his kindness. Trying to shift the mood, Kai raised one finger and said that he wanted to ask for a small favor. The two sisters immediately fixed their eyes on him, listening carefully for what this mysterious request would be. Outside, the luxurious carriage continued rolling through the city streets toward the Duke's mansion. With unusual seriousness, the knight asked them to step in and help him if he accidentally acted rudely in front of their father. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief, unable to understand why someone like him would ask for something so simple. In utter shock, she cried out that he had given away a legendary potion and had not even asked for money in return. Trying to justify himself, he lied and said that he was only a commoner who was terrified of offending nobles. Deep down, he knew perfectly well that staying alive and avoiding execution would be the greatest reward he could possibly receive. For a quiet moment, the two sisters exchanged a glance, clearly processing his weak excuse. To Lifia, someone hiding behind such a flimsy fear while carrying himself like that felt deeply suspicious. From the way he dodged the real issue, she could tell the excuse had been poorly made, almost as if he wanted them to accept it without digging deeper. Even so, she agreed to the request and promised that she would help him if necessary. Karen crossed her arms and insisted that her father would never be angry with the very man who had saved the family. Lifia also politely promised that she would smooth over any mistakes he made during the meeting. Then, with a teasing tone, Karen asked whether he intended to keep his helmet on the entire time. Resting one hand on the back of his neck, the knight admitted that it would be rude not to show his face. Karen laughed and clarified that she did not mind the armor itself, but said that she would very much like to see his face without protection. The moment those words left her mouth, she blushed furiously, and Lifia immediately scolded her for being so shameless and direct. Caught off guard by the sisters' little argument, Kai could only sit there and watch. Lifia, on the other hand, smiled softly as she observed the lighthearted exchange between her younger sister and their savior. In her heart, she had already begun to see the masked warrior as the most sincere and honorable man she had ever met. To her, the excuse about being a cowardly commoner hiding inside armor was obviously just an act meant to preserve the cover of some secret imperial organization. Faced with such modesty despite such overwhelming strength, she could not blame her younger sister at all for so clearly falling under his spell. From Lifia's own experience, the more famous a hero became, the prouder and more arrogant he usually grew. Worse still, the people surrounding such men often became consumed by envy and greed. In almost every case, warriors flaunted their gold, status, and power at every chance they got. Yet the man sitting before her had faced a deadly mafia and rescued noble daughters, only to remain humble and restrained. Because of that, she felt as though the family owed him a debt that could never truly be repaid. What she admired most was the fact that he never once tried to take advantage of their weakness. Wanting to break the awkward tension, Karen admitted that she was starting to feel genuinely nervous about the visit. Sensing an opportunity, the knight teased her and remarked that she was not nearly as cool as she liked to pretend if she was getting nervous so easily. Karen immediately pointed at him and shouted that she was not scared at all, only tense because of all the preparations. Lifia laughed warmly at her younger sister's outburst and found the whole scene genuinely amusing. In her eyes, the secretive knight had clearly provoked Karen on purpose to help her relax. As the Duke's daughter, Karen had always been surrounded by fake smiles, scheming nobles, and painfully dull politicians. Because of the age gap in status games, many noble girls had kept their distance from her during social gatherings. To make matters worse, most young men only approached her because they saw her as a future political marriage. As a result, Karen had never really had a true friend with whom she could behave like an ordinary girl her own age. In the end, the other nobles had simply walked past her while pretending not to notice her loneliness. That was why Lifia found so much joy in seeing Kai tolerate her sister's antics with patience and even humor. Unable to bear the slow pace of the ride any longer, Karen grabbed her sister's arm and demanded that they hurry back to the mansion. Sitting quietly nearby, Kai could only sigh as he watched the sisters create another little storm. In Lifia's mind, he had hidden his strength and quietly ridden in the carriage only so the Duke's family would not lose face. On top of that, he had handed over a medicine valuable enough to buy entire cities without asking for so much as a single coin. The noblewoman found herself completely enchanted and doubted that there was another man in the world with a heart so pure. With warmth rising to her cheeks, she was already beginning to think of ways to keep such a man close to the family. Taking a more practical tone, Lifia asked how long the knight intended to remain in the city. With his usual relaxed charm, he praised the city and said that how long he stayed would depend entirely on his mood. To Lifia, that vague answer only confirmed that his movements were decided by secret missions from the organization behind him. Reflecting on that, she thought that as long as a knight like him continued to fight in the shadows, the entire empire would remain safe. Captivated by the thought of him, she began wondering whether it was too selfish to want him to stay in the city. Deep down, she realized that the strong feelings Karen had for him were slowly affecting her as well. Completely unaware of the storm he had caused in their minds, Kai merely adjusted himself in the carriage seat and tried to remain comfortable. When the ducal mansion finally came into view, its sheer grandeur was enough to overwhelm any visitor. Without delay, the knight stepped down and opened the carriage door for the sisters. In the central courtyard, dozens of servants and guards were already lined up in formation, creating a long corridor to welcome them. Faced with such a grand display, Kai became utterly confused and wondered what on earth was happening. Lifia, delighted by the reception, explained that this was the family's highest possible show of respect. Overwhelmed by the attention, Kai nearly lost his tough and composed act right there on the spot. Hiding his panic, he warned that such a grand fuss would only draw more unwanted attention. Wearing a confident smile, Lifia replied that anyone who found fault with it would simply have to answer to the household guards. Swallowing hard, Kai accepted the ceremonial escort, inwardly fearing what might happen to anyone who failed to show proper respect. By the cruel logic of noble society, he understood that refusing such a welcome could be far more dangerous than accepting it. Then, without warning, the head maid and the captain of the guard knelt directly on the stone floor. Bowing their heads, they declared that it was an honor to receive the black hero at the mansion. A moment later, the elderly housekeeper rose and respectfully announced that the masters were already waiting in the main hall. With a graceful curtsy, Lifia thanked the staff and said that she and Karen would go change first. Joking lightly, she added that she would wait in the other room in case the knight needed the small help they had promised earlier. Karen nodded seriously and said that she too would act quickly if things went badly. Left alone at the entrance with the guards, Kai immediately began sweating again. In the very next moment, the captain approached him and offered to guide him personally. With perfect courtesy, the soldier asked whether he might hold the warrior's black sword for safety while he entered the mansion. Handing over the weapon so quickly left the captain visibly surprised, and he asked whether the knight was truly certain. Trying to keep things casual, Kai said that it was perfectly normal to remove one's weapon inside a noble residence. Then, in a tone that was far too sincere to be comforting, he added that he was actually much more dangerous fighting without a sword than with one. The servant's eyes went wide in disbelief. The captain swallowed hard as terror crept into his expression, realizing just how monstrous that statement sounded. Beneath the helmet, however, Kai was not exaggerating at all and spoke with complete seriousness. Back when he had still been a player in the game, he had been reincarnated into a body with absurd physical capabilities. Because his reflexes were so unnaturally sharp, weapons often interfered with the rhythm of his movements. For that reason, he genuinely felt that his bare hands were far better suited for crushing enemies than any blade. The captain, of course, knew nothing of that reasoning. To him, the stranger looked less like a man and more like some dark lord of death. Continuing onward, the old maid led the armored monster through the mansion corridors. When they finally stopped before the door of the main hall, Kai felt his heart hammering inside his chest. Resting his hand on the doorknob, he prayed silently that the meeting would end quickly and without bloodshed. Meanwhile, back in the courtyard, the captain of the guard could not stop staring at the black sword in his hands. According to the game's system, that divine blade never chipped, never broke, and could cut through absolutely anything. Taking advantage of the moment, the captain jokingly told Karen that she could try holding it under his supervision. The little redhead immediately came rushing over like a storm. Excited beyond reason, she nearly leaped toward him, eager to test the legendary weapon belonging to her savior. Completely fascinated, she stared at the polished black metal with shining eyes. Full of excitement, she insisted that the captain show it to her properly at once. Amused by her enthusiasm, the soldier presented the blade, which gleamed like a jewel sharpened into a killing edge. Karen tilted her head and commented that the sword was almost too beautiful, to the point that she found it hard to imagine it enduring real battle. Still captivated, the captain agreed and remarked that it looked more like a work of art than a weapon of war. Beneath the sunlight, the black metal shimmered so beautifully that both of them found themselves momentarily hypnotized. Resting one hand on her chin, Lithia began wondering what style of combat a warrior like him used if he claimed not to rely on weapons. In her mind, the stranger had to be some master tactician who valued speed and precision over brute force. Distracted by the discussion, Karen reached out to grasp the divine sword herself. In that exact instant, the unbelievable weight of the weapon caught her completely off guard. Startled, the captain reached for her as she pitched forward. Lacking the strength to control it, the little noble lost her balance, and the blade slipped from her hands and crashed down toward the stone courtyard. It sliced through the stone as easily as a hot knife through butter. For a brief moment, the entire courtyard went silent at the clean sound of the cut. Karen stared at the result, stunned beyond words and unable to understand what she had just done. The captain and Lithia cried out in horror when they saw the stone split cleanly apart with no resistance at all. In that moment, the older sister understood with absolute clarity that no armor in existence could protect a person from such a weapon. Trembling, the captain remembered the warrior's earlier words about being more dangerous without it. Immediately, he rushed to check whether Karen had been injured in the incident. Stammering in terror, he swore that if anything had happened, he would tell the Duke it was entirely his fault and not hers. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the meeting in the main hall had already begun over an elegant tea service. Outside the hall door, the two sisters listened quietly. From within, the deep voice of the Duke could be heard as he expressed profound gratitude to the mysterious hero for everything he had done. Karen looked surprised, noticing that her father sounded far more humble than usual. Lithia gave a small nod and said that the reason should already be obvious. Just by listening through the door, the sisters realized that even the mighty lord of the duchy had bowed his head before the masked man. Because of his political position, the Duke always had to project superiority in order to avoid looking weak. Placing a hand over her chest, Lithia sighed softly. Seeing how deeply gratitude had lowered her father's pride, Karen felt a pang of sadness for the way her family had been forced to bow because of the kidnapping. Lithia dryly asked whether Karen still had time to complain. The younger girl blinked in confusion, not understanding why her sister had suddenly become sharp with her. With merciless directness, Lithia reminded her that she had just destroyed the stone courtyard of the ducal mansion. The moment reality sank in, Karen froze solid. She suddenly remembered that she had ruined the family's main walkway with someone else's divine sword. Nearly in tears, she lamented that now her father would truly kill her because of the disaster. Pointing a finger at her, Lithia added that Karen had also betrayed the trust of the captain, who had only let her touch the weapon because he trusted her. Karen began whisper-shouting in panic and insisted that nobody had warned her the sword would be that heavy or that absurdly sharp. Lithia watched her younger sister collapse into despair and could barely contain her laughter. Even while trying not to laugh, she told Karen to stop whining. After all, she reminded her that Karen was healthy now and had the rest of her life ahead of her to enjoy every good thing she had once been denied. Brightening immediately, Karen declared that she intended to enjoy life to the fullest with her restored legs. Lithia smiled sweetly as she watched that excitement return to her sister's face. Karen nodded and finally seemed much calmer. Changing the subject again, Lithia observed that Kai had clearly tried to conceal his true strength. If the Emperor were to learn that he had casually used a legendary elixir, the warrior could be in serious trouble. Because of that sacrifice, Karen swore that she would reward the masked man in the best way she could. Lithia then recalled an odd detail from the report and voiced her doubt aloud. According to everything she had heard, the man had refused rewards and acted as though the entire rescue had been nothing unusual at all. In the real world, any ordinary person would have been overwhelmed by the kind of rewards a duke could offer. Money, land, influence, status, nobody in their right mind would refuse payment from one of the greatest noble houses. Even so, Lithia quietly admitted that what she really wanted most was simply to see his face again. Karen immediately cried out in protest and said that she would rather be the only one who got to see his face. Laughing, Lithia teased her and said that she sounded jealous, as though she wanted to keep the warrior all to herself. Flustered, Karen tried to defend herself and said that she had only seen the scar near his eye during the rescue. At that, Lithia suddenly understood far more than before. Karen's fixation was no longer difficult to read. The redhead instantly frowned and denied that she felt anything deep for the stranger. Silence stretched between them as the sisters exchanged a look heavy with dramatic tension. Karen, completely nervous, insisted that it was only gratitude and absolutely nothing more. While the younger girl was drowning in her own confusion, the mood inside the adult's room remained painfully tense. Clutching her tea, Karen silently prayed that her father would not frighten the savior away. In the main hall, the atmosphere was anything but comfortable. Pressure filled the room so thickly that it almost seemed visible. Sweating through his composure, the Duke and his wife stared at the giant figure in black armor with unmistakable dread. Across from them, the knight sat motionless, without so much as twitching a muscle. Unable to understand the warrior's posture, the Duke found himself wondering why the man had not yet demanded anything in return. In the nobleman's eyes, the stranger was deliberately choosing humility so he would not embarrass the family. Out of consideration, the Black Knight displayed not even the slightest sign of trying to claim the debt owed to him. Having saved their daughters, he now stood in a position where the Duke could not refuse any request he made. Because of the family's suspicions about Verdar and the Empire, the Lord believed the young warrior belonged to the highest level of national power. In other words, the knight had enough backing behind him to crush any politician who stood in his way. The fact that he expressed nothing at all from behind that armor only made him more terrifying to the duchy's rulers. Sitting rigidly on the sofa, the Duchess quietly suggested to her husband that this entire meeting might actually be some kind of test of loyalty. Thinking quickly, the Duke decided that treating a visitor like this without absolute formality would be dangerously foolish. Trapped in a tense situation, he began spinning one elaborate theory after another in his mind. To him, the warrior's silence felt less like calm restraint and more like an ultimatum delivered from the shadows. Worse still, the Lord concluded that if the masked man were to leave the mansion without receiving a proper reward, the entire ducal family would be disgraced. Then the knight shifted slightly in his seat, and the sound of his armor clinking seemed to freeze the whole room. The Duke nearly stopped breathing, convinced that his guest had finally lost patience. At once, the Lord realized that there was no room for even the smallest mistake in this exchange. Using the sacred elixir as a natural opening, he finally forced himself to take the lead and offer compensation. In a tone that was both polite and direct, the Duke began by saying that his family felt deeply honored. Still full of fear, he apologized for taking so long to present a reward worthy of such a hero. Inside his helmet, Kai nearly sighed in relief and simply agreed, eager for the meeting to end without disaster. With a composed smile, the Duke's wife added that offering such a reward was a matter of pride for the whole noble house. Now that the moment had arrived, the Duke finally began listing the terms of payment for the rescue. Holding up 3 fingers, he offered the knight a private mansion, a large sum of money, and the duchy's political support. Kai was so blindsided by the absurd generosity that he nearly choked and lost his composure on the spot. Across the tea table, the Duke and Duchess humbly asked the Black Knight to accept their small token of gratitude. In the Duke's mind, providing an Empire agent with a secret base of operations was an excellent move. By doing that, the duchy would also gain favor with the Emperor's own hidden warriors. Delighted beyond reason, the knight accepted the offer immediately, and the agreement was settled on the spot. The Duke allowed himself a tiny, victorious smile, convinced that he had successfully passed some invisible loyalty test. With the tension finally easing, he suggested that his daughters personally show the knight his new mansion that very day. Kai agreed at once and declared that he would take proper care of the luxurious property. Without delay, the Duchess instructed the guards to summon their daughters so they could accompany the guest. Rising gracefully from her seat, she asked the knight to follow the corridor and let himself be guided to the visitor's room. Awkwardly, Kai only nodded and slipped out in silence. The moment the great doors shut behind him, the silence in the main hall became crushingly heavy. His hands trembling, the Duke sank back into his chair and finally let his rigid body relax. As he wiped the sweat from his forehead, he muttered that he was genuinely relieved to have survived that meeting. As a final thought, he admitted that his daughter had been right and that the warrior truly was no ordinary man. Just outside the neighboring door, the masked boy stretched his arms and quietly released the breath of panic he had been holding in his chest. Karen immediately noticed his limp and exhausted posture and pointed it out with amusement. Trying to hide his embarrassment, Kai joked that armor was very useful when it came to hiding emotions. With gentle warmth, Lithia invited him to have tea and rest a little after such an absurd meeting with their parents. Karen, however, returned straight to business and complained about how little emotion he had shown after receiving 3 enormous rewards. Slightly annoyed, she said that he could at least have pretended to smile after becoming both a villa owner and a millionaire in a single conversation. Sitting there with his legs stretched out, Kai stopped himself from blurting out that, internally, he had nearly died of happiness. Behind the helmet, he admitted to himself that receiving such a mountain of wealth out of nowhere was simply too ridiculous to process. In truth, he knew that if he had been alone, he would have been doing cartwheels from pure joy. Lithia, still focused and composed, joined in and said that she wished to clarify one last point about the reward. Sincerely, she explained that if what the duchy had offered was still not enough, then this would be the proper moment for Kai to ask for anything more he desired. Hidden behind his calm persona, Kai found it almost unbelievable that he already had full pockets and a mansion of his own without needing anything else. Even so, he carefully returned to his reserved demeanor, trying not to ruin his serious secret agent image. Changing the subject, asked whether handing over one of the family's mansions was not a serious loss for the duchy. Smiling softly, Lithia answered that the family owned several villas, and that particular property held no sentimental value. Karen grumbled that the house was far too large for one person to live in alone. Compared to the duchy's main residence, the villa was apparently not far behind in scale. Hearing that, Kai realized just how outrageous the value of his so-called small gift truly was. In his imagination, only a completely insane noble would give away something that luxurious as a thank you present. With a mischievous tone, Karen asked whether he intended to let anyone else live in the mansion with him. Hidden inside his helmet, Kai let out a nervous laugh and said that he planned to use it only as his personal base. In Lithia's eyes, it seemed perfectly natural that such a famous hero would not already have a wife or a stable partner. Then Karen bluntly asked whether the Black Knight had any romantic interest in anyone at the moment. Lithia immediately blushed and scolded her younger sister for asking something so personal. Before the mood could become more awkward, Kai stepped in and told them that they were welcome to visit the villa whenever they wished, so the place would not feel empty. Karen's eyes widened at once, and her whole face lit up with joy at being personally invited. Without thinking twice, Kai even promised that he would give them a spare key so they could enter even when he was not there. In truth, he knew that having the girls occasionally around the villa would be the perfect distraction for suspicious eyes and nosy onlookers. Delighted by the idea, Karen declared that she would happily torment his patients every single day. Full of initiative, Lithia immediately proposed that they go visit the villa right away and see it for themselves. Under the sunlight, the grand mansion looked even more imposing. Its spacious living room was spotless, the furniture arranged with perfect order, and the kitchen was large and bright, filled with every kind of utensil, each one gleaming with the shine of something newly prepared. Lithia smiles and says that this is only a small token of gratitude from her family, so he should not feel burdened by it. Kai pushes open the heavy door and sees that the house is already fully furnished, down to the furniture and tableware. He wonders aloud whether it is really acceptable for him to receive such a luxurious residence. Karen looks at him and says that he can become strangely humble at times, even though he usually speaks to her so casually. Kai steps into the wide living room and takes in the lavish interior before apologetically inviting them to sit. He explains that although the mansion was granted to him, he wants them to treat it as their own home and rest comfortably. Karen plants her hands on her hips and retorts that she is not tired at all. Kai answers with helpless concern, saying that children should not push themselves too hard. Karen shouts back that she is not a child. She realizes that he is telling her to sit because he is being considerate, likely because her leg has only recently healed. The dark-armored Kai spreads his hands and says that he did not use medicine on her just so she could overexert herself. He adds that if rumors spread that he forced a duke's daughter to overwork, his life would be over. Then he jokes that if she hates sofas so much, she can always sit on this hard suit of armor instead. Between a soft sofa and rigid black armor, anyone would naturally choose the sofa. It sounds like the perfect solution. Instead, Karen marches over and sits directly on his lap. Kai's body stiffens at once, and he nervously asks what she thinks she is doing. Karen, her face burning red, answers that he was the one who suggested it. Kai says that it was only a joke, and adds that sitting like that cannot possibly be comfortable. As Karen remains on his lap, she quickly realizes that her backside hurts and regrets not choosing the sofa. Lithia watches her and asks with a smile whether things are going quite well for her, Karen. Karen, still red-faced, hurriedly says that she is not enjoying this at all. Lithia replies with smiling eyes that she never asked whether Karen was happy or not. Karen lifts her head and looks at Kai, then asks why he is still wearing armor when this is already his home and he should be dressed more comfortably. Kai responds that it is only for safety, though in truth he also wants to take it off. Still, he says that showing his face before Lithia would be far too awkward, especially after what happened at the clock tower. Since they have already met there, he thinks that he needs to change the subject somehow. To distract her, he reaches out and pats Karen on the head. Karen immediately flushes deeper and shouts that he must stop touching her head and stop treating her like a child. Kai forcefully presses her down and says that she needs to move to the sofa quickly, otherwise her backside will keep hurting. Karen struggles and says that she refuses. Kai asks in confusion why she refuses. Looking at the two of them, he then remarks that even so, the Duke is very bold to let the two of them stay alone with him. Lithia asks what he means by that. Kai explains that under normal circumstances, they should have arranged for at least one man to accompany them. Even if he saved Karen, he still does not know their real intentions, and in a place like this, no one can predict what might happen. Lithia smiles and says that her father is not the kind of man who acts without careful thought. She says that he simply judged Kai worthy of that trust. Kai replies that he understands. Even though they have barely spoken, he assumes that such judgment must come from the Duke's vast experience in reading people. Karen says that, besides, they have no reason not to trust him. She reminds him that he even used a secret medicine for their sake. Kai says that is true. Lifia then proposes that, if he does not mind, perhaps he would join them for dinner. Kai answers that he must decline. Lifia sighs and says that he truly is a busy person. Kai says that it is more or less like that. Karen looks at him and says that if he plans to leave the city, he should at least visit her home to say goodbye, and when he returns, he should tell them as well. Kai refuses and admits that he is afraid of meeting the Duke. He says that the difference in status is simply too great and there are already too many troublesome matters surrounding him. Lifia steps closer and asks him, in that case, to remain in the city as long as possible. Kai lowers his head in silence. He admits that this is indeed a pleasant city and that he intends to stay a while longer. He says he may even do some sightseeing. At the same time, he thinks to himself that there are still people searching for him. Lifia sits across from him and begins waving both hands frantically, making odd gestures. Kai tilts his head in confusion, and Karen also sways her head from side to side before asking what that gesture was supposed to mean. Flustered, Lifia quickly says that it was nothing. Karen says with a blank expression that her sister was telling her to try removing his helmet. Lifia cries out Karen's name in alarm. Karen snorts and says that her sister can punish her later since this is clearly her fault. Then she grabs Kai's arm and says that if her sister is jealous, she should just admit it openly. Lifia freezes and repeats the word jealousy in disbelief, saying that such a thing is impossible. Kai looks at the sisters before him and thinks that perhaps he is mistaken, but Lady Lifia should not be doing something like this. Karen turns to Kai angrily and demands to know why he rejected her sister so bluntly. Kai hurriedly explains that it is not like that. He says that she is beautiful, of high status, and nearly an adult. Surely someone like her must already have a lover, so would that not create misunderstandings? Lifia, looking a little uneasy, says that as he said, she has indeed received many marriage proposals, but at present she is still single. Kai is slightly surprised and says that he sees. Karen lets out a sigh and says that every time, the men are the ones who withdraw first. She explains that they fall for her sister, but after humiliating themselves, they become too embarrassed to appear again. Kai says that it sounds miserable. He adds that he can understand how those men feel, because in front of a beauty so extraordinary, it is difficult to behave naturally. Karen continues by saying that her sister is actually rather clingy. Whenever she wants to grow closer to someone, that person only becomes more shy and ends up avoiding her. Lifia covers her face and begs Karen to stop talking, saying that it is far too embarrassing. Kai looks down at Karen in his lap and thinks that she has no right to criticize anyone while she herself is still sitting there. Karen pats the sofa and tells Kai to try patting it like this. Kai asks why. Karen orders him to do it without asking questions. With obvious helplessness, Kai pats the sofa. Lifia immediately comes over and sits beside him. Karen spreads her hands and asks if he sees now. Lifia blinks, then suddenly reaches out and places her hand over the black, cold metal gauntlet of his armored hand. Karen suggests that they continue talking like this. Lifia smiles and says that she would be delighted to. Later, before the Duke's mansion, a carriage waits quietly. Lifia smiles and says that he was truly a great help today and that it was their honor. She thanks him sincerely for the precious time he gave them. As a final token of gratitude, she asks him to accept the family crest and explains that the matter is somewhat complicated, so it will take about 3 days to complete. Once it is ready, they will personally visit him again, and at that time they also wish to discuss the management structure of the estate. Kai replies that he understands. Karen lifts her skirt in a graceful farewell and says that until they meet again, he should take care of his health. Kai waves and tells her to do the same. He says that she should hurry home and not make her parents worry. As the carriage slowly departs, Kai waves after them and says goodbye. Watching the carriage grow distant, he finally says that he can at last remove the helmet. He takes off the heavy helmet, revealing a young face beneath, and breathes out in relief, saying that this feels much better. After they part ways, the carriage rolls down a tree-lined road. Lifia leans inside the carriage and looks at Karen before saying that time passed so quickly. Karen says with some regret that, to be honest, she wanted to stay a little longer. Lifia smiles and says that she felt the same way. Karen then asks whether being praised as a beauty feels good, especially since he even called her by name, which was unusually considerate. Lifia lowers her head with a blush and says that perhaps it does. She admits that after speaking with him today, she's been thinking constantly about how, despite being more famous than almost anyone else, he's still so generous and broad-minded. She wonders whether only someone like that would truly be worthy of Aldi. Karen quietly says that maybe that is true. Then she tells her sister that the real reason she wanted to stay longer was probably to get another chance to see his face. She says that she has never seen Lifia behave that way before. Lifia says that, after all, he is Karen's savior, and there is also a strong chance that he is the very person she met at the clock tower. She admits that she truly wanted to see his face with her own eyes. Karen tells her not to make that expression and says that once they return home, she can simply draw his face for her. Lifia replies awkwardly that she appreciates the thought, but Karen's drawing style is far too unique to be of much use. Then Lifia turns her head toward the window. Karen asks what she is looking at. In the distance, Kai has removed the heavy helmet and revealed that youthful face, letting out a long breath of relief. Leafia stares blankly. Karen notices and calls out to her sister. A faint smile rises at the corner of Lefia's lips as she says that, honestly, that man was teasing her until the very end. Karen looks startled and asks whether he really is the same person she met at the clock tower. Lifia nods and says that she is certain. She says that he is truly a kind person. Even though using such a precious spiritual medicine could earn him punishment from his superiors, he still chose to use it. At the same time, Kai thinks back to Karen and says that he does not regret his choice. If it was enough to heal her leg, then it was worth it. Rather than worrying about him, she says that she would rather see Karen live freely and happily again, just as before. Her words seem meant to wash away Karen's guilt and prevent her from feeling indebted. Lafia cannot help wondering whether this is the bearing of a truly powerful man. Perhaps his appearance at the clock tower had also been for their sake, to guard against the kidnappers and watch over everyone from the shadows. If that were true, she wonders just how much he had already given for them. As Kai removes the heavy helmet, he says that it is time for a bath. Lifia's thoughts continue to wander and a faint blush spreads across her cheeks. Without seeking attention and without asking for anything in return, he simply works alone in silence and protects everyone around him. To her, he seems like an incredibly admirable man. She quietly hopes that the day after tomorrow will arrive soon, because there is still so much she wants to say to him. Karen studies her sister, then smiles and says that Lifia looks exactly like a girl in love. Lifia says that since he seems to care about her so much, she wants to grow even closer to him. Then she begins wondering what their father would say if he knew what she was thinking. Resting a finger against her chin, she sinks into thought and imagines that, in their father's eyes, Kai may be someone too extraordinary to grasp easily. She wonders how he would react. Sunlight spills across the street outside the tavern. The innkeeper folds a cloth as he speaks with a trace of sadness, saying that the thought of not seeing Kai anymore leaves him feeling unexpectedly lonely. He adds that when Kai did not return the previous night, he already had a feeling this day would come. Kai cuts into the steak on his plate and calmly says that he will not be living there anymore, but he still plans to come back for meals just as he is doing now. The innkeeper watches him eat heartily and laughs as he asks whether Kai really likes the food there that much. After swallowing a bite, Kai says that the food there is genuinely excellent. The innkeeper breaks into a pleased smile and says that hearing that makes everything worthwhile. He says that he will keep waiting for Kai to visit again. Kai nods and says that he is grateful. Leaning against the counter, the innkeeper asks where Kai plans to stay next. He adds that if Kai is thinking about another inn, he could recommend a few good places. Kai spears another piece of meat and says that he has acquired a house and intends to stay there for a while. The innkeeper freezes, then asks in shock whether Kai has bought a house. Seated at the counter while eating, Kai explains that he kept refusing, but the Duke insisted on giving it to him. He says that they seem to have searched everywhere to find a suitable gift in order to thank him, which must have taken considerable effort. The innkeeper responds helplessly that this is no joke at all, because receiving a villa from a duke is an enormous matter. Kai says that it does sound fairly significant. The innkeeper irritably says that this is not what he means. He explains that the number of villas a noble owns is itself a symbol of power, something beyond ordinary people's imagination. In his view, the duke judged that forging a connection with Kai was more valuable than preserving that symbol. Kai listens in silence. The innkeeper then asks what sort of person Kai really is. Kai spreads his hands and says that he is only an ordinary man. Then he takes out a heavy money pouch and sets it on the table, saying that he nearly forgot to give it to him. He says it is payment in gratitude for all the care, shelter, and advice he received. The innkeeper stares at the pouch and asks what it contains. From the sound of it, he says, it seems to be filled entirely with money. Kai pushes it toward him and says that it is cash. He explains that the innkeeper sheltered him and offered him useful advice, which truly helped him a great deal. The innkeeper waves his hands and says that he really does not want to accept Kai's money because it feels too frightening. Kai says helplessly that there is nothing to fear. He says that he is naturally stingy, but after dragging the innkeeper into such madness, he still feels sorry about it. The innkeeper asks what madness he is talking about. Kai explains that the innkeeper helped hide him from the duke's people, and during all of that he was tense out of his mind. The innkeeper says that even so, he only wanted to do his best to treat his guests properly. Kai smiles and says that he is truly glad he stayed at that inn. The innkeeper asks proudly whether that means the place is pretty great. Kai nods and says that he thinks so. The innkeeper suddenly grows awkward and says that he had only been joking. He says that hearing such a sincere answer makes him feel embarrassed, and that Kai should have denied it or at least looked uncomfortable. Kai puts his helmet back on. The innkeeper laughs and tells him not to forget to come again. Kai answers that he definitely will. He turns and leaves the tavern. The innkeeper picks up the money pouch, makes sure no one is watching, and loosens the cord. He is stunned to find it packed with shining gold coins. He wonders how anyone could hand over so much money so casually, since no ordinary person could ever do such a thing. The same man had even called himself stingy. Within one of the three great powers, the Holy Church, Nina pinches Mary's cheek and tells her not to sit with her legs crossed, saying that she will ruin that pretty face of hers. Mary replies in a muffled voice that Nina should stop touching her face. Nina gazes at her sister and says that this must be what she truly looks like. Once blind, Nina has now regained her sight thanks to the panacea. Mary asks who Nina thinks she is and wonders how many times they are supposed to repeat this same exchange. Nina calmly says that this should be the 7th time. Mary narrows her eyes and asks whether she is doing it on purpose. Nina turns away and says that she would never do such a thing. Then she adds that Mary's way of speaking is too rough and repeats that she should not cross her legs because it damages her beautiful image. Mary leans back in her chair and says that relaxing like this every now and then should not matter. She admits that it would be a problem if someone outside the family saw her like this, but says that when necessary she can behave perfectly well. She straightens her back, adopts an elegant posture, and asks whether Nina can see the difference. Nina stares at her. Mary closes her eyes and says that Nina should stop looking at her like that. Ever since regaining her sight, she says, Nina has become more rigid than ever. Nina answers that she is only saying what needs to be said. She points out that Mary's so-called occasional behavior happens every single day. Mary objects and says that it is not every day. Nina firmly states that it absolutely is. Mary lets out a sigh. Ever since Nina recovered her sight, she has become brighter than anyone else and has been enjoying every day, not only today, but for the past 2 days as well. Mary says that none of them have ever seen Nina this cheerful before. Looking at her sister, Mary says that the man called Kai truly did something impressive. He saved Nina alone, used the panacea for free, and even used 3 bottles in one go. Nina grips the pendant on her chest and says that she knows. She says that both his appearance and his heart are flawless, exactly the type their sister would fall for. Mary smiles and asks whether that also makes him Nina's type. Nina grows a little flustered and says that she has only just regained her sight, so she has not even had time to develop any real taste in men. Resting her cheek on her hand, Mary says that she is not so sure about that. In any case, she says that Nina is still too young to set her sights on Kai. If he can hand out holy medicine for free, then he must be Verta, and if that is true, Nina would be facing hundreds or even thousands of rivals. Blushing, Nina argues that because of her age, she may still have a chance. Mary teasingly says that now someone is getting fired up. At that moment, a nun opens the door and enters, telling Lady Mary and Lady Nina that it is time for them to take over their duties. Mary smiles and says that they will handle it. Then she turns to her younger sister and tells her that it is time to go. Nina hesitates for a moment before answering that she understands. The devout Ansachi sisters, Nina and Mary, carry in their hearts a quiet hope for the day they will meet Kai again. Meanwhile, Kai stands in shifting light and shadow, silently waiting for fate. 3 days later, Mary slumps across a bench and complains that she is exhausted. Leafia approaches and points out that she has been caught slacking off again. Mary startles, then hurriedly says that it is Leafia. She insists that she is not slacking off and is merely resting. She adds that it has been a long time and points out that Leafia was not scheduled to visit that day. She also reminds her that entering the rear garden without following protocol is normally forbidden. Leafia apologizes awkwardly. Mary tells her not to worry about it and invites her to sit first. The two of them sit side by side on the bench and share a light laugh. Mary then asks whether Karen is not with her today and whether she came alone. Leafia replies that Karen is outside talking with Nina while Nina is cleaning the courtyard. Mary nods and says that she understands. Then she adds that since the sisters have appeared there again, the Duke's household must already have properly expressed its gratitude to Kai. Seated on the bench, Leafia says that she has just personally delivered her father's letter to Mary's parents, and now it is their turn. Mary sighs and says that the meeting is finally about to happen. She explains that her younger sister has been clamoring every single day about wanting to see him because she likes him that much. Leafia answers helplessly that Karen is the same. Karen keeps asking whether her sister is going to the villa again today. Leafia says that Karen has finally found someone besides her that she can rely on, and now she practically lives on that person's lap. Even when scolded, and even when her backside aches from it, she still refuses to leave. Mary smiles and asks whether Kai really has that kind of irresistible charm. With a gentle gaze, Leafia says that such charm cannot be described with words. She says that he is the finest person she has ever met. Mary remarks that this is extraordinarily high praise. Leafia smiles and says that Mary will understand as soon as she meets him. Mary's curiosity deepens. She says that this is unusual, then asks whether Leafia gave Kai a generous reward during their last meeting. Leafia answers with a touch of disappointment that the matter is still under discussion. Mary leans a little closer and asks her to tell her anyway, if only as a reference. She explains that the Ansachi family has not yet decided on the form of their own thanks, so they want to know how the Duke's household handled it in order to avoid giving an improper gift. Leafia's expression turns serious as she warns that Mary absolutely must not tell anyone else. She says that if Mary lets the matter leak, she will expose Mary's true nature. Mary quickly answers that she understands. Leaning close to Mary's ear, Leafia whispers that she must speak quietly. She explains that the reward they gave Kai was a villa and a family crest symbolizing honor. Mary stares at her in disbelief and asks whether that is truly all. She says that Kai used the panacea and even saved Karen's life, so such compensation is nowhere near enough. Lifia replies helplessly that she feels the same way, but at the time there was no better option. Mary frowns and says that there had to be some way to offer more. Lifia sighs and explains that Kai not only failed to ask for anything, but even refused the compensation they tried to give him. Mary throws up her hands and exclaims that such a person cannot possibly exist. With a serious face, Lifia says that she told her from the beginning that Kai is the most perfect person she has ever met. She adds that even her father said the same, and that she herself cannot compare to him at all. Mary shows clear surprise and asks whether even Lifia's father truly said such a thing. Lifia continues by saying that lately her father has been racking his brain, preparing for their next meeting. She says that unless he makes perfect preparations, he may not even be able to speak to Kai normally. Mary lowers her gaze and says that if a man like her father finds Kai that troublesome to deal with, then Kai must be a monster in the truest sense. She asks whether Lifia really believes that such a man is merely some ordinary player in the world. Lifia answers that her father once gave a direct order that no one under him must ever do anything that could turn that man into an enemy. Mary falls into thought, then says that this means that even if Lifia has ideas, she cannot speak freely now. She adds that if Kai truly is Verta, then the matter becomes even more complicated. His position may already be higher than theirs. Although she does not know exactly how that organization works, a man like him should be able to obtain whatever he wants. Lifia says that during their conversation, however, she truly felt that Kai seemed more interested in money than in the Duke family's crest. Mary looks stunned and says that it makes no sense. She argues that money can be earned through hard work, but no matter how much effort a person makes, a Duke's family crest is not something one can casually obtain. She says that such a crest is a permanent shield, a guarantee admired by everyone as long as that house continues to exist. Then she reasons that if Kai really is Verta and already has imperial support behind him, it may not be so strange for him to value money over that kind of protection charm. Lifia says that she believes Kai was pleased because money would allow him to help even more people in need. Mary shows a puzzled expression. Lifia continues, saying that if someone were troubled by money, receiving a villa would naturally bring overwhelming joy, but a person who could not even afford such excellent equipment would never be able to buy it on his own. Mary nods and says that she understands. From that, she concludes that their side should also prepare a more generous reward. Then Lifia turns and teases her, saying that she is certain Kai is exactly Mary's type. Mary's face turns bright red as she protests and demands to know where Lifia even heard such nonsense. She says that Nina has already said the same thing. Lifia lets out a light laugh and says that Nina is truly sharp. Mary points at her and says that Lifia has no right to laugh because she's the one radiating obvious affection for him. She warns that if Lifia keeps pretending otherwise, she will go tell Kai directly that Lifia has already fallen hopelessly for him. Lifia panics and shouts Mary's name. Meanwhile, Nina walks along the road and says that she is finally going to see him. She admits that she can barely wait. At first, she says, they were all flustered because they could not find him anywhere. Even with such conspicuous equipment, they still failed to track him down. She confesses that she truly feared he would be scolded for using the panacea. Karen raises one finger and says that if Nina feels guilty over something like that, Kai would surely scold her instead. She says that rather than worrying about him, Kai would want her to use her newly regained freedom to do all the things she could not do before and enjoy them fully. Nina looks surprised and asks whether Kai truly said that. Then she thanks Karen and says that hearing this makes her feel much better. Karen continues and says that Kai also mentioned that even if he really were scolded, he would never regret his choice. She adds that Kai sounded like someone who deeply dislikes being lectured. Perhaps, she speculates, he disobeyed a superior's order, or perhaps he already knew that doing so would not cause any real trouble. Since he has surely built up many merits, the organization probably would not want to lose him. Nina touches her cheek and says that this truly sounds like him. She says that he seems like the kind of person who would never bow his head when he knows he is doing the right thing. Then she asks whether Karen knows how long Kai plans to remain in town. Karen spreads her hands and says that Kai mentioned he still has matters to handle, so he intends to stay a while longer. She says that he truly seemed busy. Her sister even invited him to dinner at their home to thank him, but he refused because he still had things he absolutely needed to do. Karen wonders whether he is somewhere helping others or patrolling the town. Nina lowers her head and says that at night, that black armor really does help him disappear. She adds that it makes him seem even more impressive. Karen leans closer and says that since Nina is so invested, she will share some good news. She tells her that Kai often comes to the inn for lunch and enjoys simple everyday food. Nina instantly leaps to her feet. From behind her, Karen calls out and asks whether she is seriously planning to go right now. Blushing, Nina replies that of course she is not. She says that she should at least thank him properly first. Karen remains on the bench and asks whether Nina plans to leave her behind. At that same time, Kai is walking through the street and stops before a tavern. Inside, Nina asks the innkeeper what time that gentleman usually arrives. The innkeeper stammers awkwardly. Nina, using a firmer tone, apologizes but says that she absolutely must ask him to reveal that information. The innkeeper breaks into a cold sweat and hurriedly says that Kai usually comes around this exact time. Standing outside the door, Kai thinks that the innkeeper sounds as though he is being tortured. He tells himself that he only came for a meal. Nina continues by asking what Kai usually orders. The innkeeper says that there is no fixed menu because Kai always adds things according to his mood. Nina asks what Kai ate most recently. The innkeeper points to yesterday's order and says that Kai had that. Nina nods and asks for the exact same thing. The innkeeper quickly agrees. From outside, Kai watches the scene and thinks that he had no idea the innkeeper's voice could go that high. He notes that one of the girls looks gentle enough, but the other seems rather troublesome. He thinks it may be wiser not to go in today. Yet pretending not to notice would make him feel like a terrible person, especially since she once helped him too. In the end, he decides to enter first. He reasons that once other customers start arriving, the atmosphere may calm down. If he acts as though he noticed nothing, perhaps he can avoid getting dragged into trouble. But then he wonders why everything suddenly became so quiet at the worst possible moment. A helmeted nun assists Nina and tells her to hold her posture. Nina, red-faced, responds that she understands. The innkeeper looks toward Kai with desperate gratitude, as though silently thanking him. Kai says with some confusion that he would like to order food. Nina grows slightly nervous as she looks at him and asks whether he remembers her. Kai replies that of course he does, and says that he is glad to see that she is safe and well. Nina grips the pendant at her chest and says that she is equally glad to see that he is healthy. Kai glances toward the innkeeper who is hiding behind the door and then addresses Nina's guard. He says that he understands the man has a status and duties to consider, but because Nina herself requested that the innkeeper stay quiet, he asks the guard to overlook what happened earlier. Nina's bodyguard bows and offers a sincere apology, saying that he had been rude. The innkeeper quickly waves his hands and says that it is nothing at all. He even says that he ought to be grateful for such generosity. Kai looks back at Nina and says that she seems completely different from before, even down to her clothes. He admits that he did not recognize her at first. Nina shows off her nun's habit and asks whether it suits her. Kai replies that it will suit her even better once she grows a little older. Nina beams and thanks him warmly. Looking at her sleeves, Kai says that he truly never expected her to be a member of the Holy Church. Nina smiles. Kai gestures toward his own eyes and asks about her sight since that day. Seeing the lively energy in the girl before him, Kai realizes that she truly is fine now, and he quietly says that this is a great relief. Nina lowers her head and softly says that she is now happier than anyone. For years, she says, she could not clearly see the faces of her own family. Kai answers helplessly that she should not suddenly bring up something so heavy. Blushing, Nina apologizes. Kai tells her that for now she should simply lift her head and enjoy life from this point on. Otherwise, he says, using that medicine on her would have had no meaning. Nina smiles and says that she understands and will do her best. The innkeeper arrives with the dishes and says that he apologizes for the wait. Nina says that she wanted to eat the same meal as Kai, and that was the very reason she came that day. Kai says thoughtfully that apparently she can feel that way too. Nina nods and says yes. Kai adds that if she cannot finish the food, he and her guard will help her deal with it. Nina smiles and thanks him. Kai then asks whether the time she is allowed to be outside is limited. He says it would be a shame to let freshly prepared food go cold. Nina clasps her hands together and says that in that case, she will begin eating. As soon as she tastes it, her face lights up with surprise, and she says that it is truly delicious. Kai spreads his hands proudly and says that he was right, because the food there is excellent. The innkeeper asks in annoyance why Kai looks so proud of someone else's cooking. Kai complains about why only his own dish was plated so crudely. Then he says that he will let it slide today, considering the innkeeper nearly lost his soul from fright earlier. Nina laughs and says that Kai and the innkeeper seem genuinely close. Kai brings his hands together and says that their relationship is decent enough. The innkeeper answers with a helpless expression that Kai never once spoke of his background or revealed who he really was. He says that if he had known earlier, he would have kept his distance because dealing with someone so mysterious is exhausting. Kai suddenly realizes that the innkeeper has said too much. He turns toward Nina's guard and asks whether, just this once, the man can pretend he never heard that. The guard replies that as long as Lady Nina is not angry, he can act as though nothing happened. Nina smiles and says that she has no intention of getting angry. The innkeeper, sweating nervously, begs them to spare him. Kai finds the innkeeper's stiff reaction amusing. The innkeeper protests that this is how any normal person would react, and says that Kai is the true oddball. Nina looks at Kai and says that she has something she wants to ask. Since her time outside is limited, she hopes they can set a proper date so that she may visit him formally and offer her thanks. Nina says that she wanted to discuss a date for visiting so she could thank him properly. The moment he hears that, Jet Black freezes. Beneath the helmet, his eyes widen, and he can only stare in stunned silence before blankly reacting in confusion. Seeing the conversation turn serious, the shopkeeper awkwardly says that he should probably step away from the table for this one. Looking flustered, Kai nervously asks whether he is somehow supposed to be the one going off to visit the great cathedral or something. Nina immediately says that it is not like that at all. She explains that she and the others would, of course, come to his estate to thank him. Jet Black replies that this means she already knows where that estate is. Nina bows her head and says that if this displeases him, they will apologize properly. Behind the helmet, Kai is badly shaken. He wonders how she already has that information when he only received that villa a little while ago. Kai says that he is not upset, only impressed, then tells Nina that if she wants to visit, she should do it on a day off because he has things to handle during the week. Nina says that she already knows how busy he is and suggests next Sunday around noon instead. He agrees, then asks who will be coming. Nina explains that her father and mother will come, along with her elder sister, herself, and several guards. That answer leaves him speechless. Under the helmet, he breaks into a cold sweat and thinks that Nina's family is far more powerful than he expected. Trying to salvage the situation, he asks whether he can choose who actually comes to the estate. When Nina asks what he means, he bluntly says that he would rather her parents not come. She reacts in shock, but he quickly explains that he is not looking for some stiff, formal visit and does not want to attract even more attention. From the side, the innkeeper dryly remarks on the absurdity of hearing that from a man still covered in full black armor, and Kai can only think with annoyance that the old man should give him a break. Kai continues by saying that he would honestly prefer Nina's parents to focus on their work, since it would be bad if something happened while they were away. Even when Nina hesitates, he presses on and says that they can still exchange thanks even if her parents do not attend. He adds that high-ranking people like them scare him and that he absolutely does not want to meet them. Nina carefully asks whether that means he does not trust things to proceed with only her sister there, but he immediately denies that with force. At that point, the masked guard calmly steps in, says that the matter is settled, and Kai tells her to pass the decision on to his superiors. The guard replies that this was her intention from the beginning and admits that the arrangement helps a lot. Seeing it resolved so neatly, Kai quietly thinks that things are going surprisingly smoothly for once. After the meal ends, Nina and her escort rise to leave. Nina politely says that they will take their leave for now and that they look forward to seeing him again soon. Kai gives a simple farewell and watches them go. The moment the door closes and the bell rings, all the tension drains out of him. He slumps with a hand on his head and lets out a long, exhausted sigh. The innkeeper returns, carrying another plate, and asks whether Kai is seriously claiming to be the tired one. He says that anyone would be worn out after dealing with that kind of group, then teasingly adds that this is rich coming from the man who had just been speaking so casually with Lady Nina. Kai gives in and says that maybe it is better to call them both tired. The innkeeper studies him and admits that he already knew Kai was no ordinary person, but never imagined he was the kind of man who could stand on equal footing with the Holy Church. Kai can only think that if that were really true, his life would be much easier. When the innkeeper notices him staring off into the distance, he says that Kai can stop pretending around him already. Kai then says that he has realized something important. Even after learning all this, he still has not changed the way he treats him at all. The innkeeper replies that acting normal around him should be better for him as well. Kai answers honestly that it really does help. The innkeeper then asks him not to sue or punish him later for saying something disrespectful to his superior. Kai says that he would never do anything like that and adds that he is in no position to throw around words like insult in the first place. He then brings up Nina's bodyguard and says that she was genuinely frightening, clearly one of those top-class elites. The innkeeper agrees at once and explains that holy guards are all elites, so of course someone in that role would be formidable. As they keep talking, Kai says that from the fragments he heard, it seems people around him already know a great deal about him now, and he admits that it would have been nice to learn that sooner. The innkeeper immediately bursts out that he should have said so earlier because he truly thought he was going to die. Kai apologizes sincerely. The innkeeper says that, even so, they really went easy on him. When Kai asks what he means by that, he explains that they never tried to crush him with status or threaten him. He says that they simply kept asking politely, and he realizes that while he was taking up Nina's already limited free time, the guards still had to make sure she ate properly and stayed on schedule. From that point of view, he says their firm attitude was only natural. The masked guard's stern behavior lingers in his mind, and the innkeeper reflects that such people show their loyalty through that very kind of discipline. Kai remarks that this sounds like a rough position for the bodyguard too, like a pain of someone stuck in the middle. He then adds that serving people in power is probably like that for anyone in such a role, and that Kai of all people should understand that better than most. The innkeeper goes on to mention that he heard Kai was the one who spoke up about public image and status when people were trying to defend someone's side. Kai admits, almost helplessly, that he does not actually understand any of that world and only said whatever sounded right at the time. Hearing that, the innkeeper says that this only proves Kai lives in a position where he does not need to worry about such things. When the innkeeper starts wondering aloud whether that means Kai is even above some major church authority, Kai immediately denies it and says the truth is the exact opposite. He says that he is so far beneath people like that he cannot even begin to grasp their world. The innkeeper finally cuts the conversation off, saying that this is enough and that the discussion is over. Kai protests and asks him to at least let him explain a little more, but inwardly he can only groan, realizing that the misunderstandings around him are somehow becoming worse, not better. Meanwhile, outside in the carriage, the masked guard tells Lady Nina that she is glad she got to see Kai after all. Nina quietly admits that she had truly hoped to sit at the same table and share a meal with Kai, and she says with soft happiness that because of that she is very pleased. In the carriage, Nina asks her masked escort if she may ask something, then asks what kind of person Kai seemed to be from her perspective. The escort answers first that, without question, he is a powerful man. Nina gently clarifies that she means his nature rather than his strength. The escort apologizes and explains that she had been under constant watch the whole time and did not have the luxury to think about that. That answer shocks Nina, and when she quietly repeats the phrase to herself, the escort explains that people are known to lower their guard while eating, so she assumes she herself was being observed to make sure her vigilance had not slipped. She then says that, as Nina's guard detail, they already carry the heavy failure of having once allowed Nina to be kidnapped, and on top of that, they failed to detect Kai as well. She calls that unforgivable. She adds that although they had spoken with the shopkeeper, she never treated that as an excuse to relax her vigilance. Nina wonders aloud whether Kai might simply have an unusually faint presence, but the escort rejects that at once and says that it is impossible, insisting that the difference is one of skill. Even so, she thanks Nina for the concern. She then says that Kai may even have anticipated that she would clash with the shopkeeper. To her, the timing and the whole flow of events feel too precise to be mere coincidence. Nina falls silent as the escort continues and says that either he already knew they were heading to that inn, or he possesses an extraordinary eye for judging situations. She admits that she keeps thinking about what he truly meant by his words, and says that she will report everything to Nina's father as well. Nina then asks if she means the part about thanks, and the escort notes that Nina noticed it too. She explains that a man in Kai's position would never normally throw away the chance to meet Nina's parents, especially when he stands in a position to be owed a favor. She says that although he claimed he disliked drawing attention, that was likely only a pretext. Nina realizes that explanation makes sense. The escort goes on to say that people often claim they dislike dealing with the powerful, but the way Kai interacted with Nina so naturally does not fit that excuse at all. She adds that there are even rumors linking him to Vertar, so he is probably already accustomed to dealing with powerful people. After a heavy silence, Nina reluctantly says that she hates to say it, but perhaps some kind of trouble is brewing at the Great Cathedral. She admits that she cannot be certain, yet says that, knowing Kai, there must be an important reason behind what he said because he is not someone who would make such a request over something trivial. The escort immediately agrees and says they should consult Nina's father as soon as possible. She apologizes and asks whether she may tell the driver to hurry. Nina agrees and the carriage rushes on. Later, at the mansion, Nina's elder sister sits with her and nervously remarks that, even so, being personally requested by him still means a lot. She then blurts out, half flustered, that Kai really does have good taste. Nina notices at once that her sister's voice is shaking and quietly points it out, even noting that her legs seem to be trembling too. Embarrassed, her sister stammers that she had simply not expected him to go so far as to specifically say that he did not want their parents coming along just to offer thanks. She admits that, with all the talk about Vertar and everything surrounding him, she cannot say she fails to understand the burden he is under. Nina gently says that it will be fine and reassures her sister that Kai is truly a wonderful person. She adds that he is generous as her sister herself. That makes her think that perhaps going to see him as her usual self would be fair enough after all. Nina answers that it would probably be fine, but her sister immediately recoils in alarm at the thought. Nina, confused, says that it is much easier to simply be oneself. Yet her sister counters that good impressions usually come from the polished version of a person and notes to herself that it is that refined version that usually wins admiration. Nina warmly replies that she prefers the real her better. Her sister is moved by that and says she will take those words to heart. As their talk continues, the elder sister reflects that Kai truly is incredible. She says that he managed to be the very first to notice suspicious movements around the inn and always stayed one step ahead in Aldea. Based on how busy he seemed, she believes he must have been investigating all sorts of things behind the scenes. Nina wonders how he even gathers information like that, but her sister answers that it is definitely better for them not to know. To her, that kind of matter is obviously top secret. She warns that if they dig into it, there is a chance he might start viewing them as enemies, and in the worst case, he could decide they are not worth the trouble and cut ties with them completely. Her thoughts grow darker as she concludes that, however one looks at it, Kai is a complete monster in the most overwhelming sense. She even says that, for all they know, he could be listening to their conversation right now. Nina tries to brush that off and says that there are guards at the entrance, so there is no way something like that could happen. But at that exact moment, both of them hear footsteps from above. The sound seems to come from the ceiling itself. Nina stiffens and nervously calls to her sister. Her sister forces a shaky smile and says that it must be some kind of animal, reminding Nina that there was once a time when an animal got onto the roof, so it is probably just that again. Even then, Nina cannot fully settle down. She thinks that, with the timing being what it is, the whole thing still feels a little too strange. Even so, her thoughts drift back to Kai, and she quietly reflects that he really is kind. She imagines that he might even be watching over them just in case something happened. But when she looks toward the entrance and remembers that guards are posted at the main gate, she realizes how impossible that should be and falls silent. And then, the promised day arrives. Kai visits the inn again. The innkeeper says that if he were in Kai's position, he would never have had the time to go out like this so calmly. Anyone in his place would have been running through the entire meeting in their head without stopping. After saying that he gets that feeling, Kai thanks the innkeeper for the meal. Inwardly, he reminds himself that today the ruling Onsage household of the Holy Church is coming to see him. He reassures himself that he at least succeeded in keeping Nina's powerful parents from attending, and he tells himself that he has already rehearsed the first meeting in his head perfectly. Even so, one thing still worries him. He admits to himself that the real problem will be speaking with Nina's sister for the first time. To comfort himself, he decides that if things become difficult, he will just leave everything to Nina. Feeling satisfied with that idea, he praises his own plan as perfect. With one hand on his head, he says that the real reason he came to see the innkeeper on such an important day is that something has been bothering him. The innkeeper notices and asks whether something is on his mind. Kai then explains that the other day, Duke de Goat assigned a resident maid to manage the estate for him. As he thinks back on the maid's stiff and distant behavior, he says that she's been keeping so much distance from him that the whole situation feels oddly lonely. The innkeeper listens and says that he actually feels sorry for her. He says that it sounds like a huge responsibility. Hearing that, Kai falls silent and can only stare blankly ahead. Kai thinks that after getting scolded by Nina's bodyguard, the shopkeeper probably no longer pities him. As he looks around, he notices the place has become much busier and says that there seem to be more staff now too. The shopkeeper cheerfully answers that it is all thanks to him. He explains that after Kai started eating there and Lady Nina came as well, word spread through town and now everyone wants to eat what Lady Nina ate. Kai reflects that Nina really is that popular. The shopkeeper adds that ever since she regained her sight, she has been showing herself in public more often, and with looks like hers, that kind of attention is only natural. Kai quietly agrees and thinks that, even though she is still young, anyone can tell she will become a true beauty. The shopkeeper then remembers that he has something else for Kai and asks whether he has heard about the new religious group that suddenly appeared and started picking a fight with the Holy Church Nina serves. The moment he hears that, Kai realizes this must have been the information the man had been lining up ahead of time, and he thinks that it sounds like a matter on a very large scale. He asks whether the rumor came from a customer. The shopkeeper says that it did, then explains that people are spreading stories that archbishops and bishops are doing evil things. He adds that they are feeding nonsense to believers to stir up division inside the Holy Church, and he says it is clearly meant to weaken the Onsage family's influence. Kai thinks that being tied to power must be exhausting if it always drags a person into trouble like this. The innkeeper then says that the Kai's reaction makes sense because there is no way he did not already know the kind of things even he can pick up. Kai asks what he would have done if he had claimed not to know. The innkeeper says that he would probably just have given him one of those vague, agreeable answers. Kai asks what that is supposed to mean, then turns back to the rumor and says that the Holy Church should be able to handle something like this. In his mind, he reasons that they are not the sort to sit still without countermeasures, nor would they allow their prestige to crumble so easily. The shopkeeper says that he would like to believe that too, but the situation sounds genuinely messy. He points out that for something that appeared out of nowhere, it has gained a lot of momentum. Kai brushes it off and says that it will be fine in the end because the Holy Church still has power and fame. Then the innkeeper eyes Kai and asks whether he has already been pulling strings behind the scenes himself. Kai denies it, but the innkeeper's expression makes Kai ask what that look is supposed to mean. The shopkeeper replies that he simply does not buy Kai's innocent act. Kai laughs awkwardly and says that, either way, he learned some very useful things. He then decides that he should ask Nina about it too, and see what she knows. The shopkeeper tells him that this is probably for the best, since people like them would be more willing to speak to Kai than to him. He adds that they do not trust him that much. Then, he says that today's bill will be 10,000 regel, including an information fee. The innkeeper protests and says that Kai is being ridiculous because he only repeated things Kai probably already knew. And since Kai brought Lady Nina there, his meals will be on the house for a while. Startled, Kai asks whether he is serious. The shopkeeper warmly tells him not to be shy and to come by again. Kai gratefully says that it helps a lot. As he leaves, he thinks that, just as expected, doing good really does bring good back in return. When the day of Nina's visit comes, the resident maid greets him. The maid asks whether he really needs to wear the armor when meeting Lady Nina and her elder sister. Kai answers that it is just in case, because a person never knows what might happen. The maid then says that even if a fight did break out, he is said to be stronger barehanded anyway. That makes Kai freeze. He immediately asks where that information came from. The maid calmly says that it came from Lord de Goat and adds that the matter is strictly internal, so there is no need to worry about it spreading. Kai inwardly relaxes and thinks that it was a good thing he kept the armor on, since no one can see his face. At the same time, he admits to himself that this maid has lately become someone who scares him a little. Trying to move things along, Kai awkwardly asks whether the maid will be the one showing Nina and the others around. The maid says that he can leave that to her and asks where they should be escorted first. Kai inwardly complains that being put on the spot like that only makes things harder, then suggests either the study or the drawing room. The maid says there is no issue with either, so Kai chooses the study. While watching her, he quietly thinks that he truly envies how calm and composed she seems. The matter of the accompanying guards then comes up. The maid says that the guards will most likely enter with Nina's party as well and asks what should be done about that. After thinking for a moment, Kai says that it may be better to have them wait somewhere outside the study because he would rather not hold a meeting under their constant gaze. The maid says that should be fine. Kai then adds that the guards can simply do as they like around the mansion, since they would probably just get bored anyway. That suggestion clearly surprises the maid, and she asks whether Kai is sure about it. Kai asks whether that would be a problem. The maid answers that it would not, and says that as long as Kai is fine with it, there is no issue. Seeing that reaction, Kai notices that the maid seems shaken and quietly hopes that it is not a bad sign. While waiting for Nina and her sister to arrive, Kai says that he has been thinking of sharing some of the treats Karen brought when she delivered the family seal, then asks the maid whether she thought they were good. The maid is caught off guard and asks what he means, but after a moment she says that she does not see any problem with it. Kai immediately agrees and then asks how much a box of those sweets costs, since he wants to buy them again. The maid says that she is not certain of the exact price, but estimates around 50,000 regal. That number hits him like a shock, and he stares in disbelief at the thought of 50,000 regal spent on sweets. Still rattled, he asks about the ring with the gem that he was given as well. The maid says that she does not know the exact price of that either, but estimates somewhere between 5 and 10 million regal. Kai can only fall silent at that answer. Seeing his reaction, the maid asks whether he finds the reward insufficient and says that, if he wishes, she can subtly pass that concern along to the Duke. Kai hurriedly denies it and says that it is nothing like that at all. He explains that what overwhelms him is the thought of people giving away things that expensive so casually, and he inwardly wonders whether he really comes across as someone that greedy. The maid reassures him that he does not, and explains that Lord de Goat simply told her to contact him immediately if anything came up. Kai then reflects that Lord de Goat really does have a great deal to worry about. The maid says that this is simply how a noble keeps his honor straight. After that, Kai suddenly asks whether there is anything the maid herself wants. When she reacts in confusion, he says that he would feel bad just receiving things all the time and wants to give something back to her too. The maid gently protests that she is merely an employee and that Lord de Goat already compensates her more than fairly, so he should not trouble himself over her. Kai steps closer, tells her not to be so stiff, and asks her to simply tell him what she likes. After hesitating, the maid quietly admits that she happens to like sweets. Kai brightens and says that sweets are easy enough, so next time he will bring her plenty. She gratefully accepts. He then tells her that he has things to do in the study, so she should just stick to the plan once the guests arrive. The maid says that she understands. As Kai walks off, the maid thinks that she should inform Lord de Goat about this too. At the same time, she reflects that Kai's casual, almost too direct way of speaking is exactly the sort of thing she would expect from someone tied to Vertar. Before long, the visit begins. The maid welcomes Lady Marie and Lady Nina and thanks them for coming despite their busy schedules. As the guests are led inside, Nina's bodyguard says that she had not expected to find the maid still serving there. She reveals that when the villa was gifted away, she thought she might lose her position, but that gentleman considered her circumstances. The bodyguard repeats that point in surprise, and the maid says that, knowing Kai, he could easily have assigned someone much more capable in her place. She adds that she has never met Kai's former staff or had any direct dealings with him, so she would not have any basis for judging her own abilities by comparison anyway. The bodyguard reminds her that they are supposed to be talking about him, not her. The maid agrees and says that if they keep going like this, they will only run in circles. The bodyguard agrees as well. Together, they conclude that Kai is a secretive man who gives very little away, and that the people around him have already been told not to pry too deeply into him. As they continue walking, the bodyguard says that it still must be difficult having a man like that as master of the house. The maid admits that, honestly, she is probably the one who has spoken with him the most, and that even Lord de Gove himself once bowed his head to him. She also says that there are no guards stationed anywhere in the estate because Kai personally said there was no need, explaining that guards everywhere would only make things feel stuffy. Another servant repeats that point in disbelief, and the maid confirms that it is exactly what he said. The bodyguard then interprets that attitude to mean that if anyone wants to come at him, he can simply let them come, because he clearly has the ability to back that up. The maid quietly agrees that, even without guards, being inside his territory is about as safe as it gets. The bodyguard then jokes that she should be careful not to let that kind of atmosphere ruin her stomach with stress. Soon after, the bodyguard stops the small talk and says that she would like to confirm something one more time. She asks whether it is true that they are free to spend their time however they wish until Nina and Marie finish meeting with Kai. The maid says that this is exactly what she was instructed. The bodyguard then asks for the maid's opinion, since she lives with him every day and may have some insight into what he really meant. The maid says that she cannot take responsibility for pure speculation, but she will still share her guess. She says that she does not believe he meant they were free to rest idly inside the mansion. In her view, that was never the whole point. She reminds the bodyguard that protecting Nina is still her most important duty, and that there is no way Kai meant she could simply abandon that. She explains that assigning the guards to a fixed waiting room might slow their reactions and keep them from doing their jobs properly. To her, what Kai really meant by telling them to do as they liked was that they should act according to their own ability and judgment. The bodyguard thinks over that interpretation and says that if that is the case, then from his point of view, he does not really rely on them at all. The maid says that it is not that he does not trust them, rather she believes he wants them not to depend on his help. In her eyes, he is forcing them to face a harsh truth. He will not always be there to save them. She says that if they want to protect the smiles of the ones they serve, then they need to develop that mindset themselves. Finally, she admits that this is only her guess, but she believes it is the most likely explanation. The bodyguard sincerely thanks her and asks that her thanks be passed on to Kai as well. Meanwhile, Kai sits waiting in the study, baffled all over again. Inwardly, he complains that he is only saying ordinary things and telling people to relax if they want to, so he cannot understand why everyone keeps reacting as though he means something deeper. He wonders whether there is anything rude about that at all, then concludes to himself that they are the ones acting strangely. At last, Nina and Marie sit across from him. Marie apologizes and says that she wants to ask him just one thing. She explains that she means it in terms of how she should adjust her future conduct around him. Kai stares at her in confusion, trying to figure out what exactly she is asking. Nina simply confirms that this is what her sister means, but that does not help him at all. He inwardly groans and wonders what Marie is even talking about, then looks toward Nina in silent desperation and asks in his heart what he's supposed to do here. By the end,